So hi, I'm Michael. I'm an entrepreneur, a stand-up comedian. I do a whole bunch of other things. But right now, I'm your host, what we call the Second Scene Podcast. It is a Dweebs Global production where you can go for free mentorship help. Completely free, completely confidential, anything from resume writing to mental health. It's dweebsglobal.org. So I'm here today with James, and I didn't ask him how to pronounce his last name, Munton.
Oh, spot on. You got it right first time. Well done.
Sweet. So James is a professional magician, having performed for over 20 years, including at the White House and online for celebrities. James is also an expert on cons, scams, identity theft, and children's online safety. And lastly, he's pretty damn funny. I was watching some of your magic earlier today, so
Thank you.
Magic is almost a stand-up act.
Well, what I like to say is that if the magic is rubbish, then I'm a comedian. And if you don't laugh at my jokes, then I'm a magician. So I'm kind of covered both ways.
Yeah. Did you do stand-up to prepare for the magic, or did you just realize while you were doing magic?
It's funny. I have a friend who does improvisational comedy. He has like an improv group. And I went to I was just totally in awe because that's something I don't think I could ever do. And stand-up comedy, even though I love watching it, and I've always loved stand-up comedy since I was a kid, the idea of getting up there and just standing there and telling jokes fills me with dread. Now, I can get up in front of hundreds and thousands of people and do the magic show and kind of do funny things and say funny things. But I mean, if you strip away the magic and just, there's no safety net there. It's just, you've and this idea that you could like just talk for 10 minutes and nobody laugh. I mean, that's no, I've never done. Maybe one day I'll try it just to, because I've always kind of, but it's, it's interesting because that's just one thing that I don't think I could ever do.
Right. Yeah, I keep asking because I actually just did my first stand-up show last week. So it was my first ever on stage.
And how did it go?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was such a thrill, but I'm sure you get the same thrill from magic when you're on the stage and people are clapping. It's that.
Yes, I do. And actually, there is a lot of comment. A lot of the magic that I do is for children. I do my main area of expertise and performing is at school shows. So I go to schools all over Texas now where I live, but actually all over the country. And I do motivational and educational magic shows. And it's very interesting because I've always thought that elementary school age children are quite similar to drunk adults in many ways. Like there's no filter. They'll just say what they're thinking. Oftentimes they'll be stumbling around in the hallway. They don't look where they're going. They look like little drunk people walking around. And if they don't like something, they'll just tell you. So it's a very honest audience.
Yeah.
But my personal drug of choice is just the sound of like 500, 7 or 8 year olds belly laughing. That just like that unfiltered. They think they're fun. They're just they don't yet have that coolness where they kind of have that. They just let it out, and it's just the best sound ever. And yes, you're right. As I'm driving home after a show from a school, and you still have that ringing of 500 little kids laughing in your ears. It's the best feeling. So
oh yeah. So when did you start doing magic?
When I was about 9 or 10 years old. I don't think I'd ever really seen a birthday party magician, or I certainly don't think I'd ever had a magician come to my school. There were a couple of because I grew up in England. There were a couple of TV magicians that I'd always seen. But really, my first kind of exposure to sleight of hand was I went on a school field trip, I guess you call it, to the British Museum. So a bunch of us were put on a school bus and we dropped off at the museum. And while my classmates were taken on a tour of the museum and went in and saw all the stuff in there, I snuck out on my own. And because what I'd noticed was on the street, there was a guy with a cardboard box turned over, and he had 3 playing cards, and he was moving them around, and he had a bunch of tourists try and guess which one was the ace. And I saw the 3-card Monty being done in action. And what was amazing was I knew, I was 9 years old, but I knew he was cheating. I just knew it because like it wasn't where you thought it was going to be. But I saw these other adults losing all this money to him. And I thought, this man is a genius. He stood here for 5 minutes. He's just made more money than I've ever seen in my life. And so I wanted to learn more about it. So what I would do is And back at that time, 9, 10-year-olds would jump on the bus and the train and go around London with our friends. You know, it wasn't these days. I mean, you know, you're a 16-year-old, you don't let them out the house. But back then we did that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I would go down at the weekends and kind of watch the guys and figure out where they were and where they would ply their trade. And so my first kind of exposure to all of this magic was the kind of other side of the magic coin, which was the cheating and the scams.
Right.
And then what happened was, after a while of doing this and going, you know, following these guys around, they would maybe show me a card trick at the end of their session, and they saw I was just a kid, so they would check. And then my mum actually found out what I was doing with and who I was spending my time with, and she wasn't very happy about it. But she was quite clever, because she got hold of a local magician who did, you know, birthday party shows, and he gave me some magic lessons, and so he taught me how to do some cards. So kind of steered me into a more honest and so I've always used kind of the knowledge of sleight of hand and magic for entertainment purposes. But there's also that other side where it's obviously used to deceive people for, you know, financial gain. So I've always kept an interest in that side of things as well, but from an academic point of view rather than actually doing it.
Got you. I know it reminds me like Penn and Teller. I know they're constantly feverishly against scams and how people use mind games.
And in fact, the great Harry Houdini, over 100 years ago, one of the things we've just had Halloween. One of the he died on Halloween, actually. One of the things he was very involved with was exposing these fake psychics. At that time, during that age, it was very popular for people to have these seances where they would sit around a big table and the lady would say, I'm getting messages from a Don in the next life. And then but it was a complete scam, and they would take advantage of people who just lost their loved ones and built them for all sorts of money. But he would go in disguise to these seances. And while everyone was like holding hands, he'd be kind of watching and seeing how, and then he would stand up and say, I am Harry Houdini and I know what you're doing. And so he tried to put them all out of business. So there's a long history. And then, of course, fast forward, there was the amazing Randy, who for many years, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he had his $1 million Randy challenge that if you could actually prove any of these psychic phenomena, he would give you $1 million, and no one ever won it. So there's been a long line of people who magicians who've wanted to expose people using these tricks basically to deceive people.
Right. Amazing Randy. There's a documentary on him that I love. I think it's amazing what he did and what he dedicated his life to, essentially.
Yeah, really. So then fast forward, so I was a magician doing magic shows for several years, and then I wanted to do more kind of speaking events and services. And so I was told that, to be booked as a speaker, you need to be an expert on something. I said, well, I know all this stuff. And they said, yeah, but to be an expert, you have to have a book. You can't be considered an expert with the book is what makes you the expert. Mm-hmm. And so a few years ago, I wrote a book about cons and scams and identity theft, and it was published. And so then I started doing speaking. But actually, funny, talking about being an expert, while I was researching the book, I spoke to a former FBI agent. He was actually one of the agents in charge of catching the Unabomber. Remember the Unabomber who was running around so he was on the case that caught him, and he had retired, and he was trying to book himself as a speaker, and no one would book him. And this is a guy with like 25 years experience for the FBI, had like worked on some of the biggest cases, and then he published a book, and the next day his phone started ringing with people wanting to book his speaking services. It's so funny.
It's so weird. Yeah. So what's the most common scam that you see people getting caught by?
I mean, there's so many different ones. There's certainly scams that become kind of the scam du jour, a topical scam. For example, anytime there's a terrible hurricane or natural disaster, the very next day, people start getting phone calls asking for like phony donations and that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of that. What's interesting is a lot of the old phone scams that kind of disappeared for a while or weren't as popular are now coming back. And I think what happened was a lot of those scams that were being done by email, well, our email started getting smarter and blocking a lot of that stuff. So they've actually gone back to the phones, and also they've actually gone back to the mailbox. People are getting a lot more scams, in the snail mail. So that's starting to come back as well. But most scams are fairly similar in their nature. They're going to try and get you to give them some money, or in the case of identity theft, information about yourself. And they're going to have some deception that enables that. And so the story around the scam kind of can change, but the basics of it pretty much are consistent, in each case.
Got you. I can't imagine getting snail mail scam right now. I can't imagine opening my mail, but
around tax season, for example, people start getting all sorts of things about taxes. There's another one. You've won a big prize in a competition. There was in our book, actually, there was a college professor, a Canadian college professor, who lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because he got a scam letter through the mail that said he'd won a whole bunch, a fabulous prize, but the money was in America. And so in order to get the money transferred to his account, it started this whole chain of deception in which he lost all this money. So yeah, it's, and the other thing is, one of the reasons I wanted to do the book and do the presentations, it's because you're probably having the same reaction that many people do, which is, I can't believe people fall for this stuff. I can't believe, anyone would hand over the money. But these con artists are very good in the same way that when you go to see Penn and Teller do their magic show, they trick you, they fool you. You're watching them so closely and you still can't figure out how it's done. It's the same thing. Everyone thinks they can't be fooled until they are. And so one of the nice things about doing magic is I would be able to do some magic for the audience and fool them, to show them that, look, I just did a trick and you were deceived, and then show them how that can translate into a scam. Actually, one of the fun experiences I had was I've been invited a few times to do presentations for the Dallas Police Department. And so they do their in-service training for their police officers. And one of the elements of that is cons and scams and identity theft. And one of the trainers told me that they were having a problem with these cops, like not really not taking it as seriously as maybe they should, and just kind of assuming that it's your fault if you're the victim. So they brought me in to kind of fool these guys and show them how easy it is to be fooled, and then kind of hopefully soften them up a bit so they take it more seriously the next time they get a call.
You think it worked?
I think so. One of the things that was very funny is I still have a sore thumb. This was like a couple of years ago. One of the things I do in my presentation is I allow people to tie my thumbs together with a zip tie very tightly, and then I escape. Well, I got these two cops up, and this one guy yanked this zip tie on my thumbs. I thought he'd broken my thumb. I almost didn't get out of it, but I did manage to get out of it. But it took a while longer than I thought I would. But no, they were a great bunch. I always had a lot of fun doing those training seminars. Yeah, an interesting crowd.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if I would let them. They rip your finger off with the zip tie if they do it hard enough. What's the difference? Is there a difference between a con and a scam? It's essentially the same thing.
Really, I mean, they're just kind of different words for the same thing. Some people think that a con is more of or a scam is more of a kind of a smaller thing, and a con is, you have the long con where it's kind of a more involved pyramid scheme, or Ponzi scheme is, involving thousands of people, for example. But the terms are basically interchangeable.
Got you. I guess for your performances for the kids, is that kind of teach them early how to avoid?
Oh yes. So one of the things I have some different shows that I do for at the schools for the kids, and one I have is online safety and online responsibility, and partly it's to do with cyberbullying and stranger danger. But the other thing is there's a component of it, and it applies to us adults now as well. I mean, you were talking about your wife not having the vaccine earlier. See, I knew I'd find a way to get it in there, but all the misinformation that's out there, and how do we, when we're confronted with all this information, decide which is truthful and which is not. And so that is something that kids have to learn quite early, because they don't read newspapers anymore. They don't go to CNN. They get their news from bloody TikTok. So, they need to learn as a generation more than any other, that there are certain sources that can be trusted in terms of the newsworthiness more than others. Now, we can get into a great debate about all of this, but because even the established news sources, you've got Fox News and MSNBC, and whether you go left or right, but there is, when they're getting like their information from some like other 13-year-old YouTuber or TikToker, they need to recognize that there are different ways that you can tell what's legit and what's not. Yeah,
I feel like I'm getting all my news from legit places, and I understand how to differentiate what is fake and what is not. But I feel like the world is having a lot of trouble with it, and it's also harder to teach people how to differentiate it.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think we will get through it. I think we have to understand that a lot of this stuff is all in its infancy. It's all very young. And so I think that ultimately we'll find ways to fix the misinformation issue without necessarily impinging on free speech. Because one of the great things about the situation we have now is, look, you and I are talking on a podcast. We can put this information out there. Anyone can listen to it. The barriers to entry are very low in terms of people getting their voice heard. But what that means is everyone can have their voice heard, even the voices that maybe shouldn't be heard. So, but I think we'll find a way. I think we will find a way of getting there. And I think also we human beings will develop better ways of judging the worthiness and the truthfulness of the information we're receiving.
I hope you're right. I really do.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah, I'm in the middle somewhere. I do have 12 and 10-year-old boys. Any advice for how I can protect them? Because they're getting online a lot now.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that I say to parents is, oftentimes parents say, do you have any advice for tracking software so I can see what they're doing online and I can read their messages? And I have a teenage daughter myself. You as a parent do not have enough hours in the day to read through all the text messages that are ding, ding, ding. You simply can't follow them around on the web. And in a way that our parents didn't expect to kind of follow us around or listen to every conversation we had. But as parents, I think what we need to do is to open lines of communication with our kids as much as possible, because ultimately the information they need to hear is nothing new. It's the same things that our parents, would ask us, the same questions. Who are you? I'm going out, Mum. Where are you going? Who are you going to be with? What time are you going to be back home? Simple questions like that parents need to ask their kids when they're going out on the internet. So even though your son's sitting in his bedroom, he's talking to people out there. He's interacting with people. So where are you going? What games are you playing? Where are you going on the internet? What methods are you using to chat with your friend? Who are these people you're chatting with? Do you know them in the real world as well as online, or are they just online people? And if you've never met this person before, then you have to have your kind of warning barriers up a little higher, and don't disclose information about yourself because this is a stranger danger, right? We don't know who this person is, even that you've been, and you don't even know how old this person is. I mean, we all hear stories about people, pretending to be, kids and they're really adults. But the other thing is now kids they know that, playing games with older adults, and they don't necessarily have the street smarts that we developed. And our job as parents is to teach them these things. And the only way you do that is by talking about things. And I tell you, now we're able to go back to restaurants again, and it reminds me of something that I find terribly sad. Is you go into a restaurant and you look over at the table of a family that's maybe their one time they got together that week. Everyone's got these busy schedules, and so they go out to dinner and they're sitting around that table. And what do you see? They're all on their phones. The kids on their iPad. Dad's looking. They're not talking with each other. They're not interacting. So it's put the phones down for an hour, have dinner together, and have some conversations and chat with each other. And I do think that through talking with your kids, you'll learn as much about their world as they learn. They need to learn about ours.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. When we don't allow games or anything at the tables when we play Rummy 500. We play a little card game with each other, or chess. And then we talk. It gets you talking about the day and everything else while you're doing it. So
what's funny, Michael? I did a parents presentation at a school. So I'd done a presentation for the kids earlier, and then in the evening I came back and did a talk for the parents. And at the end, one of the mums said what happened. Last summer they went on a family vacation. They'd rented like a cabin in the woods somewhere, and when they got there, to their horror, they discovered that there was no Wi-Fi, that they had no internet connection, and they couldn't get any cell phone reception. And the kids were like, "Well, we're going to have to go back home then. Obviously, we can't stay here for a week with no internet." Well, they said, "No, we're going to stay here." And so she said the first 24 hours were horrible. Like the kids were like miserable and moody. But then day 2, they discovered a whole stack of board games on a shelf. So they pulled those out. There were some jigsaw puzzles. They went for walks, and they had a technology-free week in the woods. And she said when they were driving home, the kids were like, "We want to do this again next year." They loved it. So it's very interesting. We kind of think that everyone's addicted to this technology. I was another interesting that goes with this. I was actually talking to a doctor not long ago, and he is a doctor who runs a substance abuse clinic. And so his patients come in because they're addicted to heroin and crack and alcoholics. And the very first thing they do on day 1 is they take away their technology, their phones, and they confiscate them. And he said, what's interesting is the withdrawal symptoms of removing technology from someone, especially a young person, a teenager, are very similar to the withdrawal symptoms when you don't let an alcoholic have a beer or a drug addict have a drug. They get anger, they start pleading with you, they lie to you, they do all these things just because you took their phone away. And any parent listening to this who's taken a phone away from their kid knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
But the good news is this: he said 24 hours, like they're still hooked to all the other drugs and shit that's in their system, but that technology addiction is gone in 24 hours. So this thing of 24 hours seems to be, if you can get through a 24-hour period with no phone, you're going to be okay for another week or so.
Okay. Maybe I'll pretend. I don't know where we'd go if we didn't have cell reception. Maybe I'll pretend we don't.
Yeah,
I'll disable it somehow. It's so tricky at home. Now I'm going to this conversation, but it's so tricky at home.
Yeah.
Because for them to be social and for them to be able to talk to their friends, and
right.
they need almost to play the games or to get online or to do that stuff just for the social life aspect of it, because all their friends do it.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting? What COVID has taught us is that for some kids, they're okay doing that. I mean, some kids are okay just being on their own in a bedroom and just talking to their friends virtually. But most kids, they need the face-to-face. They need the physical interaction. They need the groups. They need the one-to-ones. They need all of that. And I think we're going to be dealing with the kind of the psychological effects of the COVID with our teenagers for a while, because a lot of them they were so miserable. And I know from my own daughter's experience, how important it was for her to get back to school and to have that opportunity to have face-to-face. So again, as my optimism, as we were talking earlier, I think we're also going to get to a point where, our technology becomes healthier, that, that we learn to find that balance in the same way that, like, I like a beer or a glass of wine with dinner, but I'm not a raging alcoholic. You know what I mean? We find a way. Now there are some people that can't do that. One beer is going to end up being 10, and beer's not for you, my friend. But I think with most of us, we are getting to the point where technology, we can put it down for a while, and we can recognize when we're getting those feelings that I've got to go for a walk. I've got to get some fresh air, and so I think we'll get there.
Right. Well, again, I like the positivity. So we will. So just to finish up with your magic, how was it over COVID? What did you end up doing?
Well, actually, it was good, Michael. I was very fortunate that quite quickly I figured out a way to do my shows virtually. And so I did a lot of Zoom shows. And then I also did a lot of like pre-recorded video shows for the schools where I put together basically it looked like a Zoom show, but I'm doing my whole show like this, and then they would buy the video version of that. But the Zoom shows, at first I hated them because it's all the reasons we hate Zoom meetings, as you know, all the technical difficulties and everything. There was quite quickly there was a click where I kind of figured it out. I figured out how to do them and how to make them work, and then I ended up loving doing them because I haven't done birthday party magic shows since, you know, I started out way back when, 20 years ago. And a lot of the shows I was doing was birthday party shows. So it was kind of like a full circle. And there was something really moving and fun about, even though we're in this crazy time where people aren't allowed out of their homes and they can't, you know, meet with people, these kids could still have a birthday party, even though it was a Zoom birthday party. But I would bring in grandma and I would do some fun with her. And in some cases, these people on the other side of the world, you know, so I had birthday parties where the, you know, family was in the Middle East, the kids were in New York and everywhere. And then so at the end, we would all do the singing of happy birthday and burn the candles and all the little windows. And then I'd get the kids to say a little message. And then we would finish up with a dance party. So it was, and the kids would all go to, and it was just so wonderful to see. And almost every single time, the mum would have like a tear at the end. It was just like really emotional.
Nice.
And then I had some crazy experiences. Like I got to do some shows for some really cool people. Like I got to do a birthday party show for you know, the actor Ryan Reynolds,
Of course,
and Blake Lively and their kids. And I'm sitting here like I'm with you doing my and I'm like, it's Ryan Reynolds. And you know, they were dancing along, joining all the crazy stuff, and it was so much fun. I'm like, there's Deadpool, and I'm
yeah, totally.
So actually, it was a lot of fun. But I'll tell you, when I got this school year and the schools were opened back up, or a lot of them are, that first show that I did with real kids in a real room, and I'm there, and like we were talking earlier about the sound of the kids laughing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've missed this so much. It was so good to be back able to do it.
It's definitely nice to have crowds back around. Yeah, I do improv, and doing improv on Zoom.
Yeah,
we never figured that out.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, you got to like mute everybody, otherwise it's crazy. So you deliver your zinger and it's like, just shh, there's no, look at the laughter.
Yes. I just assumed I was not funny. I just assumed that was why there was no laughter going on.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Where can people find you?
Well, I've got a few websites. JamesMunton.com is my kind of catch-all website. JamesWand.org is my kind of school shows. I don't know if I mentioned, but my character that I do when I go into the schools is I'm a secret agent magician, James Wand, the spy magician. Okay. And so I do a fun show around that. And yeah.
All right, great. We will put both of those links underneath the video and the podcast so people can find you. That's JamesMunton.com, MUNTON.com.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you so much for being here today with me.
It was my pleasure, and good luck with the comedy career, Michael.
Thank you. We'll see if it lasts more than one performance.
I'm sure it will.
So again, this has been a Dweebs Global production where you can go for free mentorship help, anything from resume writing to mental health. It is free, confidential, and they're there waiting to help. We have people like around the world, every country, every language. There's somebody to help you. Dweebsglobal.org. See y'all next week.